the St. Louis district of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the year 1993 will be remembered as the year without a summer. Oh, it was hot. It was a sweltering, 98% humidity kind of heat. And there was rain, not the soft, gentle rain of summer or the quick hit-and-run downpours, but pouring, continuous, driving rains that washed down the valleys in torrents and blew across the land in sheets. Rains that turned streams into mighty rivers and mighty rivers into powerful forces of destruction. It was the year of the Great Flood. During that summer, more than 300 men and women from the St. Louis district gave their time, their energy, their expertise, and their hearts to hold back the rivers. This is their story. The first assault actually occurred on April 15th, when a spring flood fed by snowmelt and spring rains swept through the area. This flood fight ended May 21st and served as a warm-up for the main event, which began approximately 1 month later. The Emergency Operations Center served as a command center for the flood fighting efforts throughout the district.
Our initial situation report we did on the 27th of June, and that was because we had earlier in April and May, we had high stages here, which we had activated, and the river had gone down, and it had started to go back up. And when it continued to rise on the 1st of July is when we activated the EOC. On the 8th of July, we went to a 24-hour operation. The Emergency Operations Center is the focal point of the total operation during the flood situation. All of the coordination between the flood fight teams comes into this office here. This is also where people are calling, requesting information. In addition, each of the areas that are activated are in contact with us by telephone, by radio, and also by fax machine.
Once the EOC was opened and war was declared, no time was wasted in calling for district recruits. The response included rangers from the lakes, secretaries, dredge workers, student employees known as stay-in schools, and technical personnel from the flood fight teams.
We started laying that first sandbag. It was obvious that it takes more support, more people to get accomplished what we need to get accomplished. And our office called, and Mr. Kornberger asked me if I need any help, and I wasn't shy at all. Yes, I do. We got these people instantly. They were pouring out here in their own vehicles. They were bringing boyfriends, some brought husbands. Wives came out. It was good. We had some kids. We had volunteers from local communities and some visitors that were just touring the area. But the biggest support was our district office. St. Louis district came through on us. We provided a little humor with a couple of our employees, and we provided some meals, and but they provided a lot of hard work.
I did a lot of different things, sandbagging, driving, delivering sandbags to different locks, picking up vehicles from different places around the country. They sent out a message that they needed volunteers. It was hot, rainy, and bags started getting heavier, but it was a lot of fun because we were trying to prevent something from disaster from occurring. So we got the job done.
We have 3 people off the dredge, Potter, that helped us through this. We had people from the district office that helped come out sandbag on a couple of days, and we had some people from Riverlands that helped us out. We also had some people that just walked in off the street and volunteered. So it was quite an effort, it was.
Additional engineers were also needed. Some came from other districts. However, some of the most valuable help came from within the St. Louis district. Sue Janota Summers, normally a Corps biologist, and Janet Ulevy, an engineer in the design branch, were 2 who volunteered as flood fight engineers.
But what I really liked best was I showed up places and people went, oh my God, thank God the Corps is here. I never got that before. It's a pretty heady experience going into a situation and having, for instance, 3 troops of National Guards going, ma'am, what do you want us to do now? I would do it again, if only because now I have a lot of experience and also because you can make decisions and people listen to you. It's nice.
After the first few weeks of the flood, I felt so, not sad or sorry, but some kind of feeling that my heart just went out to these people that were affected by the flood. We had some friends that were flooded out from their homes, and they will not be able to rebuild. And I just felt this need to help. You know, sending money to Salvation Army and whatever, that helped somewhat, but I just felt the personal need to help.
In addition to those serving in the field and in the EOC, support functions performed by those in the district offices, including logistics, clerical, purchasing, and contracting, were crucial. A media center staffed by engineers and public affairs specialists worked full-time just keeping the media and the public informed.
There are a lot of misconceptions of what the federal government does to floodings. Most of the levees that have failed up to now are relatively low levels of protection, particularly protected farmland.
Well, I think it really prepares us even better because the river here in St. Louis problem.
The levee districts and the boards and all that are going to know.
From the beginning, the Corps believed that this flood would break all records, but no one knew just how high, how great the volume, or how long this flood would actually last. In 1973, the previous flood of record reached 43 feet in St. Louis, 13 feet above flood stage. On August 1st of 1993, after more than a month of rising water, the river finally crested at 49.58 feet, nearly 20 feet above flood stage. It would be more than 2.5 months before the river returned to its banks. During the 12-hour days and nights, flood fight teams relied heavily on advice and support from the EOC in the district office. The EOC supplied field engineers with equipment, personnel, and most importantly, skilled leadership and quality decision-making throughout the crisis.
The support from the district has been really good. When I call up there to the EOC or the geotechnical branch, they respond. I get supplies or maps I need within a day. Jake and Emmett are there. I mean, they might give me some questions, why do you really need this? But after I explain the situation, they're there to help me. They have really taken an active role in trying to make my job easier because the locals see that. We can get on a mobile phone or a radio and say, hey, we need help, and we need it now. And we can get approvals within half hour, 45 minutes. Example, Cascade Island, we were ordering rock within 3 hours of the time we identified a problem and came up with a solution. Boys Brule, the same way. We had their complete support after we explained the problem, gave them what our ideas were. They were willing to listen and willing to go the extra mile, and I really do appreciate that.
In St. Genevieve, raising levee number 2 took a strong, concerted effort between the Corps, the National Guard, and levee district farmers. Jim Hill, sector engineer for the Kaskaskia Levee District, supervised the levee construction.
The farmers have worked with us and Lua Brothers throughout the entire contract period, monitoring the levee, pointing out low spots, hot spots as they developed. They've been working this Valley Spring area on their own with their own equipment and the Guard's equipment, even before we arrived on the scene. And they continued to do that, and they were so worried about getting this 45-foot crest, and at the time that they started, they actually called in a contractor and began getting work done before we awarded the contract. And they didn't know how they were going to pay for it because they were broke, but they just figured, well, we just got to do something.
Colonel Broughton, who was over the National Guard, came up and talked to Jim Hill, Bill Bush, and all these people and says, okay, now you're here. We're going to step back. You tell us what you want us to do. You take the bull by the horn, and we'll help you. And those people just work. It's unbelievable how two different groups of people work that well together.
The contractors that were hired by us, the Corps of Engineers, to do this emergency work on the levee district number 2 did an exemplary job. They worked for almost a month, 24 hours a day, building up this levee and putting rock on top of it to keep ahead of the floods, the river stages. And as the crest changed, so did their effort.
I want to thank them for sticking their neck out, because for some unknown reason, if the Corps would not sign this contract, they was willing to pull their equipment back with probably no charge or very little charge. Now, you won't find too many people that'll do that for a little old farm boy.
The levee held in Grand Tower near Cape Girardeau, but it wasn't without a lot of work and effort on the part of the local community, levee district farmers, and the Corps of Engineers.
When we first got to this area with the geotechnical group, most people didn't know each other, and it took a day or two to start getting to know each other, different locals and things like that. But once myself and the other people on the geotech team start working with the locals hand in hand, looking for sand boils, looking for any kind of deficiency in the levee, people start respecting each other. When you're in waist-deep water, when you're throwing sandbags, trying to make these water berms to try and contain the water for the sand boils, you get to know these people pretty well. In their sadness, you can go on each other's shoulders. And it's really close.
We just took it one day at a time and fought with it. We had real good correspondence with the Corps of Engineers. They helped me a lot. They didn't try to do nothing secretly. They come to me. We talked about every day what we was going to do. We made a game plan of when we was going to evacuate the people, at what stage. They came with me to the meetings that I asked them to come to. We don't get a lot more water. We should make it.
Fortunately, the levee held, and residents were able to return home once the danger had passed. The town of Clarksville also held back the river, but they too had a tough fight. The town was as concerned about keeping water out of their historical district as Lock and Dam 24 was in keeping water out of its control house. But they supported each other with supplies, shared knowledge, and lots of emotional support.
Chris Morgan, the lock master, got me 2 pumps. And they were also nice enough to go pick them up. They brought them right to the front street for me. All we had to do was unload them and put them in. And Chris and I talked about it every day because I'd have to call him almost for moral support to tell me what was going to happen.
In the midst of the heat and rain came sand boils, mud, seepage, and the ever-present mosquitoes. Quick thinking and ingenuity made the difference from Clarksville to Cape Girardeau.
In 1973, the river stage was 36.3. When this originally started, this flood was predicted and the crest kept being raised. I had the advantage of Dan Buckley, who was the lockmaster back in 73, who made a 35mm film. It was black and white, no sound, but I reviewed that movie twice to see what they did in 73 to get ready. We did everything he did, and we kept increasing and benefiting by things that we did see by his film. That work flat over there is our work flat farthest lock and dam, and it's normally used just to put timbers on gates or do little repairs. We used that and we left it inside the chamber through this whole thing. So everything that was the most important component was sitting on that barge inside the chamber, and we had the lines secured all over the place.
In addition to nature's fury, human error occasionally forced the issue. On the Illinois River near Hardin, a National Guard Humvee patrolling the levee somehow managed to get stuck in the mire formed by seepage.
Okay, what you got is some real soft spots in this levee. If you look right here, it's still real soft, and we're going to have them put some more weight on this area. Bring it up just to get some weight pushing down against the hydrostatic pressure that's on these levees right now. Over here you got You got the, we've put those bags around that Jeep to give it the pressure so the water will build up in there if it can, and keep that pressure on that levee. That's what it's there for.
Water movement beneath the St. Louis floodwall required the Corps to act quickly to solve a critical problem before a breach could occur. A failure of the wall along the city's north side would have devastated the heavily industrialized area.
Well, our flood fight team on the ground was right there, and thank God for those folks that we have, our area engineers, sector engineers, geotechnical engineers that are out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, patrolling and looking for problems, and they found it in a hurry, and took the only real immediate corrective action that could be taken.
Flood conditions required that we couldn't drive any sheet pile. We couldn't do a lot of things. We had to come up with some other ideas, and what we came up with was to build a secondary ring levee around the area so that if the wall did tilt and allow water in, that at least a secondary flood wall or levee would contain it, because without it, we'd have had water all the way down to the arch.
After the Columbia and Harrisonville levees overtopped, something had to be done to prevent the flank levee at Prairie du Rocher from falling victim to the domino effect. A decision was made to try a controlled breach of the Riverside levee in the southern part of the district, in hopes that Prairie du Rocher, the next levee district, could be saved.
We decided to try this controlled breach at Fort Chartres area, and that's a major undertaking because we've never done that before. So we got with the locals that morning, and we worked out a plan in order to actually try a controlled breach. But the key to this whole thing is not to get anybody wet before they would have anyway, which is really kind of a juggling act, and it takes some logistics. But luckily our efforts with the controlled breach and some of the efforts of the locals shoring up this north flank of Prairie du Rocher Creek, we were able to save Prairie du Rocher. You know, it's a small victory, but it means a lot to us. You know, it's really a miracle. I mean, you think about it, the levee was built for a 45 flood elevation, and we held 49.5. I mean, it should not be there yet today, but it is, and we feel real good about that.
Not all battles had happy endings, despite the work, effort, ingenuity, and unrelenting diligence. The river claimed Kaskaskia Island, Bois Brule, and Columbia. Kaskaskia Island was the first to break.
Right now we're standing at the breach that occurred on July the 22nd. It all started out with the morning before a sand boil was discovered in the area, and the workers got together and they built a ring dike out of sandbags around it, and it was under control. It was making some material, but it was contained within the ring dike. Later on that afternoon, it was checked again. Everything was doing real fine until about 12 midnight on the night of the 21st. The boil became very active. I was called at the motel at about 12:30, and I came out, and when I got here, there was probably 40 people here. They were hauling sandbags in, and they were ringing the boil, and they had a diameter of the ring around it was probably 12, 15 feet. The boil at that time was very active. They put many sandbags around it, made a durable double wall, and by 3 a.m. The work was complete and the boil had settled down. Then at about 9:30 that morning of the 22nd, the boil became very active again. Some people were down here. They were trying to ring it because part of the wall had collapsed. It had eroded underneath the wall from the boil action. It had collapsed, and in just a matter of minutes, it just became more active, more active, more active. And at that time, the people left the boil area, walked up on top of the levee. A small crack was discovered on top of the levee. Immediately, we moved vehicles back out of the way. And within 5 minutes, the boil action had lifted up the seepage berm, water was flowing under it, and we had complete failure.
Columbia, an agricultural levee designed for a 45-foot river stage, held out to the end. For 2 long months, record volumes of water pounded the levee night and day. When the river finally crested, more than 4 feet above the levee's designed height, it was simply too much, and the levee overtopped. The loss was a bitter pill to swallow for those who stood their ground, matching the river blow for blow, right up to the end.
When it hit about 49.4 in St. Louis, that's when it was actually coming over about 6 different places. I was running down on the south end. I had Mike on the top end. There was just, we were sandbagging using pickup trucks because we had cut off the access because we'd raised a levee once before, our last ditch effort, and we were trying to just shut off the holes as it was coming. It was like trying to plug like a Swiss cheese. It was coming in all over the place. And finally, about 9:30 on that morning, on Sunday morning, it actually, a breach developed at, we call it Gumersheimer's Farm. That's the famous footage you'll see on all the newspapers that shows the house leaving.
I figure I lost 4 levee systems. There's not a one of them we gave up on. Caskie Island, they were fighting it to within 15 minutes before it blew out. While I feel very, very bad about losing these levees, I know we fought them to the bitter end, and I believe the systems performed well beyond what they were ever designed for.
Fighting a flood takes a tremendous toll on everybody involved. Depression, hysteria, and rumors became more and more common as the flood dragged on. It seemed that the most unbelievable rumors developed in the safest places. Dennis Gilmore was part of the successful defense of the Metro East side of the Mississippi.
I guess the Sunday that the river crested, myself and 3 or 4 other co-employees, all with our hats and little red shirts on, went into Emo's Pizza for lunch. This was about 1 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. And we walk in, they have all the chairs up on the tables, and the lights out, they're closing up, leaving. Hey, can we get a sandwich? No, we're closing. The levee's broke, we gotta evacuate. Hey guy, if the levee had broke, you think I'd be standing here trying to order a sandwich?
Fighting this flood is difficult even in the best of situations, but it's even tougher when the flood gets personal. About 20 Corps employees lost their homes or were displaced by the Great Flood, yet they continued to work at their jobs, helping others.
I lived in a little village of Caskie. I've lived there the biggest part of my life. And when my folks died, well, I bought the home place from the rest of the family and have lived over there ever since. We knew things was getting serious. We were having some pretty serious sand boils. In fact, I had worked on a sand boil till 4 o'clock in the morning the day that it broke. And at 4 o'clock, it had calmed down, the sand boil had calmed down and was looking pretty good. So we had a car. We kept one car on the Illinois side and one on the Missouri side. And the seepwater was getting deep, so we quit using the car that was over there and started using the 4-wheeler. But I was having problems with the clutch on the thing, so that morning I thought, well, while I was off work, I'd take it to Festus where I bought it and have that adjusted. I did so, and of course, while I was up there, it had broke. I crossed on the 4-wheeler, on the barge, on the 4-wheeler, and went to the little village of Caskie, but thinking that maybe I could get some clothes or something off it. But the water was already too deep. It was too close to the house where the break was, and it was starting to come in the floor when I got there, so I knew that I didn't have time to get anything out.
The Riverlands Area Office manages the Environmental Demonstration Area, a 10,000-acre wetlands which the river reclaimed.
That last weekend when the crest was revised upward, we got hit.
We had moved a lot of our files out, and we had moved furniture, but we didn't think we were going to have to completely evacuate the office. And when the water finally did come across, there was no way to evacuate the office. We had nowhere to evacuate the materials to. And we ended up with about 30 inches of water in the office. So we ended up with a situation where we didn't have an office, and we were actually flood victims. A lot of our employees live right near or along the river or communities that were affected. Myself, we didn't have any running water in my home for a week and a half. We had one employee whose home was completely inundated right up to the roof. And I think one of the most admirable things that I've seen that's come out of this flood event that speaks well of the Corps of Engineers is the fact that these people never missed a beat.
As in any other moment of human tragedy, this flood fight had more than its share of heroes, both known and unknown. But the Great Flood of '93 also has its legends. On July 25th, Harold Smith, a member of the flood fight team near Cape Girardeau, was swept into a breach at the Bois Brule levee.
I could see the water running out from under the levee. It didn't look like that it was any sort of a life-threatening situation. It didn't look like the levee was about to give away. It looked like more or less it was piping through, piping under as it does sometimes. So I decided that I would back my truck up and get the spotlight and shine on it so I could determine just exactly what was going on. Carl had went back to his van, which was sitting right in front of my truck, to get a flashlight. So in the meantime, I just started backing up, and I hadn't backed very far till my back wheels dropped down. So naturally, I just immediately tried to shift it forward, and I was just slipping backwards all the time. And I was at a pretty good angle like this, I suppose, with the truck. And I just put my foot on the gas feed on the floor, and the truck came straight up. It just climbed straight up like that. And if it would have fell forward, I might have could have got enough traction to go on out, but it just tilted backwards, just like this. So I'm sitting here just like this, going down. And it stopped about the door level, and I pushed the door open, but the water was forcing the door where I couldn't get the door open. And I knew I needed to get out of that truck. And whether or not I got out of that truck or not on my own, or how I got out of that truck, will never, ever be known to me or anyone else. I don't get. The next thing I knew was the water was crashing on my head. And I'm sure I was out of that truck, because I remember I went straight down, and I remember all the material pounding me on the head from the levee. I was conscious practically through all of that. It seemed like all of it. I was bound to have lost consciousness at some point.
But his good friend Bucket was there to lend a hand.
While we were in the process of looking at this sand boil, one of the locals came up yelling out of his truck that we had a breach in the levee on the lower end, which was 10 miles down the levee. And so we ran up to our trucks, and everybody was heading down that way, and just to see if there was anything that could be done for the safety of the public or the locals in the area. And as soon as we got in our vehicles, then we heard over the radio that one of our people and a vehicle probably went in with the brake. And the guy I knew the people that were on the night shift, and I've known most of them for about 10 years. So then I kind of went into this mode that I'm gonna go help my buddy, and I'd been working in the area for a few months, and so the first thing went to my mind was what had previously happened at Kaskaskia when it broke, and I knew which way the water was going to go if the break was where they said it was, and there was one shortcut that could be taken across the bottoms on a blacktop road that I knew I had about 20 minutes to get to the other side and on the back side of the break to try to find the guy if he had a chance, to be found at all.
Well, at this point, I was positive that I was dead, and I could see the lights from the generator. So as soon as I realized that I was looking at this giant light, which looks like a huge light to me, I thought, well, that is the light that everybody sees when they're dead. And I wanted to get to that light. I could look down this way and I could see darkness, and I didn't like that darkness at all. And I kept wanting to get to that light. And that was the only time that I was really stressed out. I couldn't understand why I couldn't get to that light. But in a short time, I guess I was getting more oxygen, more air and everything. And I looked up and I could see the stars, and I could see the light shining on the levee. And at that point, I realized that I was alive.
Once I got in the area where I thought he might be washed out to, I started stopping about every 50 feet, honking my horn, whistling, flashing lights. And about the 4th or 5th stop, he had made it to the levee, and he had crawled up about 3/4 of the way, almost to the top. And I saw him get up on his knees and raise his arms, and then he kind of fell back down.
And the first guy on the scene out of the truck was my good friend Bucket. Bucket has worked for the Cooperative, and we've been friends for years. And Bucket jumped out of the truck, and I told him, I said, he said, "It's good to see you." And I said, "It's good to see you too." And I said, "I can't walk, you'll have to help me." So he come out, and then the rest of them all came, and they set me up in the truck, and they wrapped me up with a canvas, I believe it was, kept me warm, and took me to the emergency room. But like I say, I wasn't on the levee over 15 minutes before they rescued me, and I like to thank them every chance I get.
For many who lived in the path of the river, the Great Flood of 1993 is a nightmare that won't soon fade. Sometimes it is necessary to accept defeat, but the human spirit, though it may be tested to the limit, like the river, like the seasons, keeps coming back, stronger than before. During the flood of '93, the Corps of Engineers gave everything they had to hold back the river. And if needed, they would choose to do it all again, not because they feel that they were heroes, but because they made a contribution.
But it's very difficult and very emotionally draining for people out in the field who are standing out on a levee at 2 o'clock in the morning with a levee district standing over them, and a lot of the public and the National Guard and all sorts of other folks standing out there saying, "What do we do now? We have a choice now. We can continue to flood fight, or do we give up? What do we do?" And there's a guy from the Corps faced with all that and has to make that choice. And they don't have to make that choice just once, but they're making it over and over and over again, night after night after night, working 16 hours a day, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week for a month. So that's certainly going to have an emotional toll. And then if they've made a decision and then the levee fails, they stand there and watch the farmland and the homes get washed away.
I don't know about hero. Hero is somebody who, I don't know what a hero is. I mean, it can be a month, like you said, but I never really felt like a hero. I was doing my job. That's what we're paid to do here. I'm not sure that I don't agree that we're heroes. We did what we needed to do and what we had to do at the time. And we did the best we could with what we had.
Seldom do you get an opportunity to congratulate them on doing something that is a true, useful function by itself. That's not true in this case. In this case, they performed a service to the nation, and they ought to be proud of that fact. And if they had not been there, there was nobody else to perform that function. So they truly did help their neighbors and the nation.
The war with the river is over, and in its wake it has left tales of hard work, heartache, and heroes. But it also left us with the sure knowledge that the men and women of the St. Louis District Corps of Engineers can rise to the challenge of the river, meet it on its own terms, and win.